It's getting late and it's time for the 30th film in my 31 Horrors of Mike. Now, I think television is a wonderful medium, and one of the things that always struck me about television growing up was just the impact, the shared impact that a television programme could have. And often the ones which impacted us the most were horror based or fantasy based, and ones which also involved characters of a similar age to us, going through similar problems that we were, similar issues as we were growing up. Now, It, which was released in 1990 and directed by Tommy Lee Wallace, was one of those television events. It was one of those events where I went to school after the first part and talked about it, and then the next night again talked about it with my friends as well. And it's a film which combined horror and growing up together in a way which really affected myself and many of the people who watched it at the time. It's based on the Stephen King novel of the same name, and it's about a small town in America that is preyed upon by some sort of evil, malevolent force which takes the form of a clown, which calls itself Pennywise, played brilliantly by Tim Curry. This creature kills a young boy called Georgie. I nearly stuttered myself there. One of the characters is a stutter in the film. He kills a young boy called Georgie, and Georgie's brother, along with his brother's friends, kind of bond together into this sort of losers group. That's what they sort of call themselves, or consider themselves, and they band together to try to hunt down and find this evil, malevolent thing and to destroy it. And what we have is a story which jumps back and forward between these kids when they're adults, looking back and remembering, because a lot of them have forgotten. There seems to be some sort of hazing process going on where there's a hazing of the memory. They can't remember exactly what happened, and as they recall it, we get to see the memories play out, and then there's this, reveal. It's not a big reveal, but a reveal which is that this thing is perhaps coming back, and how are they going to deal with this as adults, and are they going to resolve some of the issues that were left hanging as children. So that's the story of it. Like I say, Tim Curry plays the clown brilliantly, terrifying, scared the crap out of me as a kid. I mean, clowns are frightening anyway. You ask anyone, I don't know any child that thinks a clown's this happy, jovial character. Clowns are terrifying. That's a fact. And Pennywise the Clown is certainly one of the most terrifying incarnations of that demonic clown face that seems to haunt children as they're growing up. And it's a film, it's split into two parts, much like Salem's Lot, which was an earlier adaptation of a Stephen King novel of the same name, which I still hold up as one of the best adaptations of anything that Stephen King has written. And it, likewise, is a great adaptation. Now, Tommy Lee Wallace hadn't really done he directed a few films. He directed Fright Night Part 2, for example, which I'm a fan of, and but the what I would say about it is that it has some really iconic, frightening moments which have still stayed with me, and when I watch them back, I still find them really frightening. The story does follow loosely what happens in the book, but there's a lot in the book which isn't covered by the film, and I think you might always get people who don't like the adaptation as much for that reason. Certain characters, their behaviours and things like that, their personalities are changed slightly as well, but it's it's just something that I remember going back and talking to my friends the next day, and we were all like, "Did you watch that thing It last night? Jesus Christ!" Scared the crap out of me. And there are just moments in it. The moment where the girl goes back to her house where she had an abusive father, and there's an old lady there, and she sort of, well, I don't want to ruin it, but something happens there in that scene which really just terrified me, absolutely terrified me. And I think as well, you've got this idea of this thing which preys on young children, and the whole film opens up with the brutal murder of a child. And also, what's interesting is that Pennywise, in some ways, is the sort of similar to the later incarnations of Freddy Krueger, where you kind of find him funny in places, but he's so brutal and evil. You know, it's not a comfortable thing if you find something that he does or says funny. But Tim Curry just hit it out of the park here. You know, just fantastic actor, fantastic performance. The one criticism I would really have of this is that the ending is very rushed. It doesn't make a lot of sense to people, and it doesn't really pay off what is a brilliant build-up, in my opinion. But if you can look past that, the whole thing is fantastic. I would say the first half is probably better, where you're just seeing what happened to them as kids. I think that first half works really well, and it's interesting. In some ways, you could say that this film signified the end of that era where there were where there was this Spielbergian influence on films which were about kids of a certain age. I mean, you still had films like that in the 1990s, but they weren't anywhere near as popular. And I think it is very, very dark because it almost sort of deals with things that you see in movies like The Goonies and The Lost Boys and stuff like that, but it's about somebody that's a child killer. So it's so dark that those sorts of films might not have the same sort of sheen for you when you after you watch this one. So that's it. I would absolutely recommend it. I really enjoy it. I think there's maybe an edited together version where it's edited into one film. Try to get the full thing. If I haven't seen the edited version, but if it's similar to Salem's Lot was butchered into one film when really it does work as two films that are linked together. So go and watch that. That's it, and I'm going to be back shortly with the last film in this year's 31 Horrors of Mike. Bye for now.